Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 6th Ironside Take30 with a Data Advisor. My name is Jeff Spear. I run the information management practice at Ironside, and that covers data modeling, data warehousing, master data management, some governance, as well as cloud data warehousing. And today we're going to be talking about a data warehousing perspective on IBM Cloud Pak for data. We're going to talk a little bit initially about what it is, after we cover some Ironside background, and then we're going to go into some detail on some underlying technologies that sort of talk about why it exists and what advantages it grants. And those include containerization, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. And then we'll come back and talk about Cloud Pak for data in more detail, and then we'll take questions. So if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the question window. We can also take them at the end, and I think we'll open up the audio as well if you want to ask them out loud. So this is the 6th Take30 with a Data Advisor. We have our 6th Take30 BI coming up tomorrow, and then we're doing a second season of Take30. We've got the full details at the end. We hope you'll continue to join us for these sessions. You're going to have to re-sign up for season 2. And we'll be sending out emails, and if you go to the website, you can click on the link and sign up as well. So Ironside, we've been around for a couple of decades. Our purpose is to help you make better decisions using your data about your business. We have a variety of different capabilities to help you do that, including strategic advisory, as well as design, whether that's experience design or data modeling. We do a lot of building and deployment of data warehouses, dashboards, visualizations, predictive models. We do a lot of work in the governance space, so making sure that you have the right people, processes, and tools to govern your data, also covering master data management. And we also manage things, so we can actually physically run platforms. We can run stuff, we can administer stuff that you have running, basically to help to keep your analytics up and functioning. So Cloud Pak for data covers just about all of that, really everything but the advisory side, and we'll go into more detail about what it does in just a moment. So we partner with lots of capable partners. Cloud Pak for data is an IBM product, but one of the things that's nice about it is it runs on multiple cloud vendors, including AWS and Microsoft Azure. So it's got some good flexibility. So what is Cloud Pak for data? It's an IBM platform for data analysis, integration, and analytics. And it sort of has two main aspects to it. The first is it has a web-based, self-contained tool for the full analytic lifecycle. So within one tool, it gives you the ability to discover and connect to existing data sources. You can then establish governance rules for those data sources, and those can be sort of guidelines or enforced rules. You can then integrate data. You can create data integrations and transformations. It also has a powerful virtualization capability that will let you bring data together without moving it from its original location. You can create and deploy statistical models, and you can then visualize that in reports and dashboards. So all of that is available in one place, one web-based service. And then on top of that, you can extend it with a variety of other services, both from IBM and from other vendors. And so this includes Netezza Performance Server, which is the newest version of Netezza, Cognos Analytics, DataStage, SPSS, Watson Knowledge Studio. So all those things can be added to the Cloud Pak platform to extend it and give you more capabilities.
Jeff, just a real quick question here. How does the Netezza Performance Server compare to the existing Netezza appliance?
That's a good question. So Netezza is, for those who aren't familiar with it, is an appliance that does analytic queries. It basically is a big parallel SQL database that's very good at running large queries over very large amounts of data very quickly. And so there's been a few different versions of Netezza. It's had a few different names, and Netezza Performance Server is taking that to the cloud. And so most Netezza versions have used a version of SQL called Postgres, There was a more recent version of Netezza called Sailfish, which switched more to the DB2 based SQL to be compatible with other IBM database systems. Netezza Performance Server goes back to the Postgres-based code, and it is 100% compatible with those older Netezza appliances. So literally, you can spin this up in Cloud Pak for data, and then you can back up your Netezza data from your appliance, restore it onto NPS, and everything will just run. The code is 100% compatible, and so really it's the way to, a lot of the appliances are going out of service. This is the way to bring them forward. This is the new architecture for that capability. So that's what Cloud Pak for Data does at a high level. Before we go into more detail on that, I want to talk about some of the foundational technologies that make it work and why they are important. And the first one of those is containerization. And I'm going to talk about containerization by comparing it to virtual machines. For those who remember, a while back, sort of virtual machines took the IT world by storm. Before that, everything was a physical server, and then all of a sudden, everyone's running everything on VMs. And the way virtual machines work is described on the left of this slide, where you've got a physical machine that's usually very large with a lot of CPU cores and a lot of RAM, a lot of memory. It has some operating system installed on it, and then a piece of software called a hypervisor, and that's what makes virtual machines possible. And it basically allows you to split that machine up into a bunch of different sub-virtual machines. And so each of those virtual machines has its own operating system installed, and then applications running on top of that. And so the hypervisor, can sort of assign each of them some amount of CPU, some amount of RAM, and they each go off and do their own separate things. So that was a way to sort of make it easier to, sort of manage all these things. Each app that you're running is on a VM, and you put the VM where you want it, you give it the resources it needs. So containerization is an extension of that concept, and that's described on the right. And so similarly, you have a big physical machine, it's got an operating system, and then instead of a hypervisor, it has a container manager. And that works in a similar way. It sort of lets you create these containers, and each container has an app running in it. But instead of having its own operating system, the container manager gives each app access to the underlying operating system of the physical machine. So instead of having multiple operating system copies, you've got one, which makes everything more efficient, means you can fit more apps on a given machine because you're not consuming resources for all these operating systems, and it makes the applications more lightweight and easier to manage. So that gives you the advantage of like I said, everything is lightweight. It makes things portable. You can easily move a container to a different host. It has to have the same operating system because the operating system is not part of the container. And it's much faster. It's very easy to spin up and spin down containers quickly whenever you need to do that. It's also standardized. There are a couple industry standard container solutions. Docker is probably the most popular. Creo is another one, and that's the one that Cloud Pak for Data is currently using in its recent version. And it's microservice friendly. Microservices is a buzzword that has been popular for a few years. And it's a concept where instead of having large monolithic applications, you split up your code into lots of tiny little services that do very specific things, and then they sort of talk to each other in a network or a mesh. And so it's very easy to scale up a particular service or make changes to a particular service. And so that makes perfect sense for a containerized environment because containers are easy to spin up quickly. And so it's easy to have lots of these little microservice containers and have them all talking to each other. It is less directly relevant to analytics, but it is one of the reasons that containers are so popular today. So the next logical step when you have containers is, we were talking about having containers on one machine. The next concept is to have them on multiple machines. So you might have a cluster of physical machines, and this slide has 2, but you could have as many as you need. And then you have a lot more flexibility and capability to bring up, the apps that you need in the place that you need them. And if you need to scale up capacity, you add another physical machine, and then the apps just get started up on that. In order to make that work, you need software that manages the cluster, that tells the container manager, hey, I need you to start this app on this physical machine, and just sort of orchestrate and keep everything running properly. And the cluster manager that is by far the sort of lead and number one is a cluster manager called Kubernetes. And so you'll probably hear that term a lot. Sometimes it's called K8s or Kates because there's 8 letters between the K and the S. But regardless of the name, it is just software to manage a group of physical machines that are running container managers. So Kubernetes does a few different things. It lets you create new containers based on demand. It can restart containers if they fail. You can add nodes, and then it makes it easy to sort of do patches and updates. So if I have a container and I have a new version of it, it will propagate that out and make sure that everything is brought up to speed. It has some powerful capability for grouping containers together. So for example, maybe my application has a front-end container and a back-end container, and I can say, hey, these are a group. You know, I need to have one of each running, or they need to run in pairs so that they can work together. And then you can label them. So you might label those two as front-end and back-end, but you could also label them, you know, dev, QA, and prod, so it's easy to understand which containers are test and which are production and all of that. It handles name resolution, so containers, you can find these containers that might be on different machines. And overall, it just helps to sort of keep things the way you want it. Basically, you tell Kubernetes, here's how I want things to be, and it works to keep that end state in effect. If a container fails, Kubernetes will restart it. If I say, hey, my capacity needs to go up, so please, you know, double the number of this container, it'll look at what's out there and start up containers appropriately to make sure that that happens. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility to make sure that, you know, the resources that you need are there when you need them in the place that you need them. So Kubernetes is very powerful to manage these containers, but there are some things it doesn't do. It doesn't really cover storage. So you fire up a container, that container might need, you know, persistent data. Kubernetes doesn't really handle that. It doesn't really have enterprise grade security, and while it does manage things, it's not really sort of centralized in a friendly way.
Sort of 2 questions on this slide. One
Sure.
of them is they've asked if you can compare Kubernetes to AWS scaling.
Okay.
And the second is if you can compare Kubernetes to a VM.
Sure. So Kubernetes compared to AWS scaling, I mean, AWS has a couple different ways of scaling things. If you think about sort of traditional virtual machines, EC2 nodes, they call them in AWS, that really goes back to this previous slide where you can create extra nodes in AWS, but each one has its own server with its own operating system, and so there's a lot more overhead. And Kubernetes is much more lightweight. There are parts of AWS that are very similar to Kubernetes in the sense that, you know, Amazon basically manages the internal, you know, this is a thing and you can add more stuff to it. So, you know, if you think about Redshift as an example, that's sort of halfway between them where you can create extra Redshift nodes. You don't have to worry about setting up the operating system. Amazon does that. So you can just say, hey, give me some more containers or more nodes, and AWS will take care of that. So it's if you look at some of the scaling that you can do on AWS and other cloud vendors, you know, they are doing similar things, and often behind the scenes they may be using containers and Kubernetes to make that work. I'm sorry, the second question was comparing Kubernetes to VMs?
Yes.
So VMs are usually when you have VMs, they're a little more sort of heavyweight and less flexible. Like if I want to make a new VM, someone goes in and says, okay, I'm gonna create the VM and maybe there's an image, but I have to spin it up, I have to pick what machine it's on, I have to configure it, I have to make it available. It's more like provisioning hardware. Whereas Kubernetes is doing that dynamically. So with Kubernetes, I can say, hey, you know, like I need to make sure that 2 containers for this app are always running. And if I push the button, I need to make it 4. And Kubernetes will say, great, you need to make it 4. I'm going to find a machine that has the capacity to run those, and I'm going to fire them up. And so it lets you sort of do it more dynamically as opposed to having it be sort of a slow, you know, manual process. So it's more of a fluid or dynamic situation where things can change either based on new requirements coming in, or it can react to, you know, something crashing or something needing to be updated, or other external situations that make the system deviate from the end state that you've specified. So it's really sort of more of an orchestrator than VMs, which are just sort of you set them up and they do what they need to do.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to jump back to, so IBM created OpenShift to add a couple extra features on top of Kubernetes. They put a customized Red Hat Linux OS, which is designed specifically for containers. So it's very sort of focused and efficient. It's got Kubernetes, but then they added security, better management, logging and audit, and the ability to deploy to multiple targets. So you can deploy to different cloud vendors, you can deploy on-premise, you can deploy a mix, and then there's storage solutions. And so the end result is you've got this prepared platform where you can take software and just say, I want to put it on OpenShift, and whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-premise, it just sort of comes in, finds the resources it needs, puts the containers on those resources, and starts running. And if you look at the architecture diagram over here, we sort of got all the different pieces we talked about now combined together. You've got cloud vendors at the bottom, there's a service layer, and then OpenShift with Kubernetes inside it is firing up different applications, combining them into pods on different server nodes, and then applying storage on the right, and then security and access on the left. So all of these things together bring you to a place where you've got a platform and you can say, hey, I need some software, let me get it up and running quickly. And so that's, coming back to the slide, that's what gets enabled when you create Cloud Pak for Data. So you have the ability to set up this self-contained tool that's just going to run on this standardized platform. And then if I want to add other things, it's very easy to add them because the foundation, the basis for that to run is already sitting there. If we look at the, oops, there we go. If we look at the Cloud Pak architecture, again, you've got the base Cloud Pak for Data, the web-based front end. You can add services to it like Cognos or SPSS or DB2. It's running on top of OpenShift. This is the Kubernetes symbol and Kubernetes. And then it can be on-premise and in a variety of cloud locations. So because there was a lot to talk about, we're not doing a demo of Cloud Pak for Data here. However, the good news is at the end of this, there's a link. You can go get a free 7-day trial. It'll fire up an instance and you can go in there and there's a guided tour, or you can just explore all of this yourself. So it's very easy to go get a very specific look at what this does and if it makes sense for you. So this is the main menu when you come into IBM Cloud Pak for Data. And so all of these things are available in one location. You create projects, and so you can sort of organize your analytic work by different projects, and you can assign data sources and users and all sorts of things to projects. You can connect to existing data. You can then virtualize that, or you can do integration. So if I have different types of data, I can combine them together a couple different ways. It all gets cataloged, so I can do discovery and management. You have the capability to govern it, so you can apply rules. You have the ability to assess and improve data quality, and then you can take all that and turn it into dashboard analytics. So all of this stuff is sort of sitting there, and the 7-day trial is really great. It will walk you through sort of what it looks like to go from looking at some data to producing analytics. This is sort of on the governance side. This is an example of the types of things you can do. So in this case, you've got some governance rules saying I want to protect certain types of data. You can set these up as sort of warnings, or you can make these enforceable. So I can say if I identify this kind of data, it's protected, and I'm going to enforce that so that people using this self-service tool, can be governed and you can make sure that you're meeting compliance and regulatory requirements. So this is a partial list of the stuff that you get with Cloud Pak and the stuff that you can extend it with. So when you get Cloud Pak for Data, this includes Auto AI, which Pam talked about yesterday on Take30 with the data scientist, Watson Studio Machine Learning, Watson Knowledge Catalog, Regulatory Accelerator, DB2 Warehouse, virtualization, Jupyter Notebooks, analytic dashboards, Netezza Performance Server. All of this is in the base Cloud Pak for Data. There's also dedicated services like Watson Knowledge Studio, DataStage, Cognos, SPSS, DB2 Advanced. So these things can be added on, and because of OpenShift, that's a relatively easy process that I'm going to describe right now in the next slide.
Jeff, before we go to the next slide, can I add something on that particular slide?
You can, and I apologize because I forgot to introduce you. This is
Okay.
Sandy from IBM, who's also here to answer questions and keep me honest.
So the only thing that I wanted to make sure that we understand is that the statement you made is from a licensing point of view. The capabilities that you mentioned are all included in the base license of Cloud Pak for Data, but you have to always remember that they'll need capacity and resources to run. And so
Yes.
when you're sizing it, you have to make sure that you size it appropriately for the functionality you intend to leverage. So not everybody will leverage, I'll just pick one, not everybody will leverage the regulatory accelerator. So you would not need to plan for capacity for the regulatory accelerator, but you would need more capacity than just the minimum capacity to run. So you have to make sure you plan your capacity accordingly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, like we were looking at the diagrams, all of these things are applications and they have to run and they take resources. And so, yeah, depending on your usage, you may need more or less of those resources. And so, yeah, you have to plan accordingly, both from a physical capacity and a licensing perspective. Oops.
Jeff, yeah, we had a question about the integrations and how Cloud Pak integrates with DataStage and with DB2 and how the various integrations works and the differences between them.
Sure. So there's I guess the best way to think about it is there's an environment set up for that I would say is really good for self-service, mode 2, self-contained. I want to go to this one place and do all of these things and have them all set up. I go there, I have everything I need. And so, in that environment, you have analytic engine to do integrations, you have DB2 warehouse, you have services that give you all those capabilities. At the same time, there are use cases where, hey, I use Cognos Analytics or I use DataStage and I just want to use it. And I want to bring it forward into Cloud Pak so I can, install it on the cloud vendor of my choice or for whatever reason, I need to have that. So in that case, these things function more or less as they function now as a dedicated ETL tool or analytic tool or modeling tool. They're just running on the OpenShift platform, and I'm going to use them in the same way that I've used them in the past and get sort of their specific power. And so you have that sort of, I have the dedicated single service use case, a self-service use case, and I have the very specific single service use case.
So I would like to make just a slight refinement to that definition. Yes, that is true, but all of the functionality and services had to be containerized and to be able to run in OpenShift. And in this particular case, DataStage, the cartridge will be managed by Cloud Pak for Data, so it's not running alongside of Cloud Pak for Data. It's actually running on top of Cloud Pak for Data, and those containers are managed by the master nodes in the Cloud Pak for Data scenario. So
Yes.
From that standpoint, it won't have it's not a separate standalone instance. It is actually an integrated instance into Cloud Pak for Data. The same is true of the Cognos Analytics, the SPSS modeler, and even the Watson services like Assistant, Discovery, all of those. So liken it to the fact that they're integrated to the point that they have to be running on containers. They have to be running on containers that are running on top of OpenShift or compatible with running on top of OpenShift, but they will be running the same master management nodes and they will be running the same storage layer. Right. So they're not alongside, they are actually integrated. And because of that, they are each of the cartridges or these extended are have gone through a journey of which functionality is being brought forward because it had to be brought forward to a container. And so from that standpoint, it is our effort of trying to bring our value add, highest quality in the market functionality, not start over from scratch, but bring it forward into a cloud native environment. So it is integrated. You do have to check to see if everything's in it. There is a comparison on our websites of what's in the standalone and what's in Cloud Pak for Data's cartridge, but for the most part, these ones listed are are even, and it is one code base. So we are also taking the standalone versions and making them containerized and to run on OpenShift. So either way, it will be the same code line.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that gives you the power of, you have an OpenShift platform. It makes it very easy to do this installation and management.
Correct. Thanks, Jeff.
So here's an example of analytics services that are available. Again, this is from within the Cloud Pak for Data interface, and so it's very easy to see what's available, what's enabled, and if you're sort of curious about how those integrations work, you click on any of these and it will tell you, here's what this is, here's how you set it up, and here's how you use it. So it's got a very, very good interface to help you understand how that integration and management works. So I think Sandy just covered a decent amount of this, but there is a process to adding services. It leverages the containerization, which makes it easier to do. It makes it easier to migrate. And some of these services, do require additional licenses, and obviously they require additional capacity, which is going to have cost as well. If you want to spin up a Cognos environment, that takes resources to run and requires Cognos licenses, as an example. Oops, keep scrolling the wrong way with my mouse. So from a use case perspective, you've really got the ability to have a one-stop location for if I just want to do all of my analytic and modeling in one place. I want it to be governed, I want it to be simple, I want to be able to explore, integrate, transform, analyze. But then you've also got this expandable platform for services that you may already be using, like Cognos and DataStage. And you've got the ability to deploy to different cloud vendors or on private or some combination. And if for some reason you need to move, say you decide you don't like AWS, want to go to Azure, or vice versa, you have that capability. So Cloud Pak provides a great cloud, private, hybrid, neutral analytic platform. It does that by leveraging a number of technologies that we talked about, including OpenShift, which is built on top of Kubernetes, which is built on top of containerization. Containerization lets you spin up small applications very efficiently in a lightweight manner. Kubernetes manages those across multiple servers, and OpenShift adds sort of enterprise-ready authentication, management, storage, and other capabilities to create a very easy platform that gives you an all-in-one ingestion, governance, modeling, and analytics solution. It's very easy to add additional services to, and it's a very powerful platform for future expansion. I strongly encourage you to go do the 7-day trial. It'll fire up an instance. You can go in and play. There's a guided tour. You can see what's in there and find the right use case for your organization. So we've had a decent number of questions during the presentation. Are there any final questions before we sign off?
So Jeff, we do have a couple of questions, and if folks can just hang on for 5 minutes, that's great. And we also will individually send out the answers to those folks that if they have to leave, because it is the bottom of the hour. But one is, what kind of data quality features are part of Cloud Pak?
So I'll actually, Sandy, do you want to take that one?
I can. So there's a couple of different ways of answering that question. So from the data profiling point of views, there's some standardization features that can be put into place with policies and rules and categories and terms, when you're classifying data. But some of that came out of what you would have known as quality stage and information analyzer. But there's also some of, if people were familiar with the old Watson Analytics product that did some data profiling and a quality capabilities for analytics, like, how much percentage is null and things like that. That stuff also exists in there. There's actually a pretty robust set of quality, because that's one of the things that we're trying to be, is that data layer that is available in it. And there is specific projects. You spoke of the analytic projects, Jeff. There's also quality workspaces where you can be working on data, refining it and profiling it. There's a lot of ways to look at your data, see what's there, and improve it.
Thank you.
And the other topic that we wanted to touch on was how do microservices work for analytics?
Sure. So I think that what we're seeing is, I mean, microservices is something that's very popular in the sort of development world, but often people who have microservice environments are using that to feed their data warehouses, and basically will, if you have sort of this network of small applications that are managing your data, it's very easy to create a service that trickles data to your warehouse, or make sure that appropriate data sources are updated more immediately as changes are made in the environment. So this is something where analytic teams may want to work with their development teams to sort of, instead of having to do sort of bulk transfers, create a service to bring data in a more efficient manner. Some analytic tools are also being written using microservices, but that's sort of more under the hood and not something that you have to directly worry about.
There's one other place where it's leveraged heavily, and that's in the actual scoring modules of when you're actually doing scoring. By being able, in the platform, you are able to take an analytic model or an analytic algorithm and promote it to a REST API that can be called within applications. And because of that, the scoring module then becomes very microservicely driven. So you don't have to batch up everything to run it through a scoring module on a regular scheduled basis. You can do this in real time, or any application can do it when it needs to find out the current score for whatever analytic you're trying to run. So very much in the scoring space, it's very microservice-y, I guess, if that's a word, microservice-y.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I do have one last question, and I also want to thank Sandy Tucker for joining us. And we apologize, we had trouble getting her webcam up, so you can't see her when you can hear her, but we really appreciate her being part of this. The last question is, why should I move Cognos to Cloud Pak? What's the advantages there?
So, I mean, there's potentially a couple of different reasons. I mean, one is, I think the big reason is it's a very good, sort of future-proof foundation for running your Cognos. It is more sort of flexible. It is more expandable. You have better ability to add capacity, and so especially if you're trying to consolidate, your various software tools in one place, OpenShift, Cloud Pak is the place going forward to do that. I think that's probably the largest reason, but also if there's some integration needs with a use case like this self-service Cloud Pak for Data environment, you can also get a lot of benefit out of that as well.
Terrific. Thanks, Jeff. And I think we should wrap it up. And
all right, I think I've got on screen the upcoming Take30 sessions. So I encourage you to sign up for any or all of them. Yeah, hope to see everyone in our future sessions.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.